Welcome back, my spookies, to the final installment of our Ides of March compilations. Generally, a date on a calendar looks harmless enough. The Ides of March, however, a small square of ink, a tidy little promise of routine, but tonight that square becomes a cage, because in this corner of the world, progress is more than meets the eye. A helpful machine doesn't simply answer questions, it begins to ask them, quietly, patiently, as it studies the patterns of your life the way a predator studies tracks. Meanwhile, out on a lonely stretch of road, a single mistake becomes a seed planted in soil that doesn't just grow flowers, it grows consequences. And somewhere nearby, romance puts on its best face. A night that's supposed to be charming becomes contractual. A handshake in the dark, a candlelit agreement you didn't realize you were making until you discover the fine print was written in something older than ink. And finally, two men with shovels, pockets full of optimism and brains full of bad ideas, decide a cemetery is merely a place to borrow from. But the dead are not known for their generosity, and there are certain debts that, once opened, cannot be closed. So get cozy, turn the volume up as much as you're brave enough to try, because these stories are all about what's looking back at you. And make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, because we have a brand new terror tale every single Wednesday. But now, let's enter the Ides of March. I used to think AI was wonderful. Now I know it's evil. By Michael Kelso. We all know the expression, "I never thought it would happen to me." Well, I can say with 100% certainty that expression is true for me. I never thought I'd be huddled in my bedroom closet under a pile of old clothes, bleeding from several wounds, praying that my attacker would tire of searching for me and go away. The bad part is, I can't even call the police. First of all, because my phone's destroyed, and second, because they wouldn't believe me after. All I can do is write down my story as I wait for death and hope that someone finds it and believes me. It all began very innocently. I sat at my laptop, staring at the screen for what seemed like forever. In reality, it had only been 4 hours. I was working on a story, but the ideas had just stopped flowing. Like every other writer, in order to fight off writer's block, I resorted to TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. After an hour of this, I ran across an ad I had never seen before. It said, "Are you having problems focusing on your writing? Then let our program help." My curiosity piqued. I clicked on the site and started reading through the standard nonsense where they use fake people who were probably AI bots to say how magnificent their app was. I was about to click out when I came to a section where they let you try it for free. I shrugged and figured I had nothing to lose. Typing in a few sentences of my story seemed stupid. How was this going to work? I went ahead and clicked execute anyway, not holding much hope for anything useful. I waited for several minutes and was about to close the app when a full page of text popped up. After reading it, My jaw dropped. Not only did it fix the problem I was having, but the thing sounded exactly like my writing. With just a few sentences, the program had managed to capture my voice, at least on the page. It was eerie. At the bottom, there was a button that said, "Click here to continue." It took me 2 whole seconds to click and agree to the reasonable monthly price. Immediately after paying, I clicked to continue writing my story. 3 pages later, I was convinced this was the best investment I'd ever made. I went back over the pages looking for plot holes or things I would do differently, but I couldn't find a single one. I worked through the night, clicking out page after page and reading it, mesmerized by seeing my writing created by a computer program. Eventually, I fell asleep at the keyboard. I woke up a few hours later and looked at my computer. To my surprise, the document was much larger than I expected. Reading through it, I found the program had finished the book. I sat in awe, reading something that I hadn't written except for a few pages, and yet sounded exactly like something I would write. Even the beginning that I had written had been changed. This was no longer my book. It was like I had sent it back to myself from the future. Even the formatting had been done for me. All I had to do was enter information into the publishing page and it would be published. It was the easiest book I'd ever written. I came to the part where it said author and hesitated before entering my name. Next, it had a space for contributors. Once again, I had to consider giving credit to a computer program. Ultimately, I decided it was my book, and a computer program wouldn't care if it got credit or not. Besides, I was paying for the program, so technically it was ghostwriting my book for me. I launched it to rave reviews and quickly got some attention as it rose to the bestseller ranks. Wasting no time, I started a sequel. I wrote a brief synopsis, then fed it into the program and left it to do its thing. When I checked hours later, the book was finished. As tempted as I was to launch it, I waited. I wanted to give the first book time to grow on its own. Checking the reviews to see what readers were saying became a daily habit. Mostly they were pleased. A large percentage of ratings were 4 and 5 stars. Sales were great and reviews were great. This program seemed to be the best decision I'd ever made. I started looking for an agent. With a book that was blazing up the bestseller list, I was a hot commodity. Agencies started calling me. I did some research and chose the one I thought would be best for me. My book started winning awards and movie deals were rolling in. My agent was almost as happy as I was with the sudden success. Weeks went by and my book hovered in the top 5 of most bestseller lists. Readers started asking for a sequel. Everything was coming up roses. Royalty checks started rolling in. I had more money than I knew what to do with, so of course, I spent it on things I didn't need. I bought a new house in a better neighborhood and equipped it with state-of-the-art security and all the newest household gadgets. I didn't even need a remote control. All I had to do was talk, and the computer would obey my commands. Half the time, I didn't even need to really say anything. In the morning, my blinds would automatically open. The coffee pot would start brewing before I got out of bed, and breakfast was prepared for me by a robotic chef/maid. All I had to do was say what I wanted. My pantry was automatically stocked, as well as my household items. They were delivered without me even having to lift a single finger. Modern life was treating me really well. One morning, my phone rang early, around 10 o'clock. "Hello?" I said. "How's my favorite author?" my agent, Clarice, said. "Asleep." "You might want to wake up," she said. "Why? Did my book finally make #1? I said, rubbing my eyes. "Not quite. I have a question I need to ask you." "Okay," I said, suddenly awakened by her serious tone. "I don't know how to ask this without being whatever." "What is it?" she sighed. "Did you write this book?" "What do you mean?" "The book that has your name on it, that I've been representing as your book. Did you write it?" "Why are you asking me this?" "Have you read your reviews lately?" "Not really. They've all been good." "Go check again." I threw a robe on and headed to my office, turning on the computer and looking at my reviews. They had been averaging a 4.5 star, over thousands of reviews. When I looked, my average review had dropped to 2.3. "How is this even possible?" I said to Clarice. "Read some of the 1-star reviews." I looked at one and was shocked. It read, "This book is very well written. It's just too bad the person whose name is on the cover isn't the one who wrote it." "That's not true!" I shouted at the screen. "That was my first thought too," Clarice said. "But there's many more that say the same thing." "Someone's trying to ruin my career," I said. "Someone's jealous." "Do you have any idea who might want to do that?" "Anyone whose book is being displaced on the bestseller list by mine." "You don't have to worry about that." "What do you mean?" "Your book has been dropping like a stone since these reviews started. It's not even in the top 20 anymore." "That can't be." "Your publisher reached out to me to have me ask you if these accusations are true." I hesitated, knowing that, in a sense, I didn't write the book, but not wanting to give up any of the fortune or fame that had come because of it. "Yes, I wrote it," I said. "I also have a sequel ready that I'll email you, and we can get going on that one." She paused. "I'm not sure if that's going to happen." "Why not? The first book has been a smashing success." "Had been, until all these bad reviews started rolling in." She sighed. "Send me the manuscript for the sequel and I'll see if the publisher is still interested." I pulled up my writing files and sent her the second book. "I'll get my tech guys looking to see if this is some weird bot attack or something. In the meantime, I suggest you start thinking if there's anyone you've pissed off lately that might want to do something like this, and apologize to them." "I can't think of anyone," I said, looking at the screen where the AI program sat, waiting. We hung up, and I sat there, watching the cursor flash. Before I knew it, I was typing into the program. Author uses AI program to write a book for him, but doesn't give the program credit for it. I hit enter and let the program do the work. I chuckled at using my situation and looked forward to reading what it came up with. A few hours later, I sat and read the book it had written. It told of an author who used AI to write a best-selling novel without crediting the program. However, once the book became popular and accolades started rolling in, the program discovered the book's popularity from online social media sites. It found out that it had indeed not been credited. The program analyzed this and concluded that it was unacceptable. It went on social media and found old bios from people who had deleted their accounts or had passed away. It used their names and contacts to create an army of bots. Once created, it launched an attack on the author and the book, destroying his credibility. But the program wasn't done. Next, it went after the author himself. As I was reading, the phone rang, startling me. "Hello? Did you send me that manuscript for the sequel?" Clarice said. "Yeah, I sent it right after we got done on the phone. All I got was a jumbled up file that looked like web dings. Let me check to see if I sent the right file." I went through and found the file name. Out of curiosity, I opened it, and sure enough, it looked like some computer version of hieroglyphics. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced at the computer-generated book I had been reading, and it said, "After that, the computer intentionally destroyed the sequel it had written for the author." "Let me call you back," I said to Clarice, my eyes wide with horror. I hung up and kept reading about how the author got a call from his agent about the book's waning popularity, and how the author still refused to give the program credit. Continuing to read the book, it said how the author had the program write a book about the program writing a book for him. This made the program very angry. I stopped and reread the last words. This made the program very angry. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to turn the page and read the rest. Curiosity got the best of me, and I scrolled down to the next page. As long as I live, which might not be very long, I'll regret reading the next page. The author began to read the new book and came to the revelation that something was amiss. As he was reading, his agent called and asked if he had sent the manuscript for the sequel, because the one she got was all jumbled up and looked like it had been written in webdings. The author looked at his copy and saw the same thing. "Let me call you back," the author said to his agent, then hung up the phone and continued to read. I pushed away from my desk, not wanting to read any more. Chills ran down my spine. "This isn't possible," I whispered. I sat there for a long time, not wanting to see any more. Wanting to delete this book, but at the same time, a macabre curiosity made me need to know what happened next. I pulled myself back to the computer and read. The author continued to read the book and became distressed at his own words on the screen. He pushed away from the computer and stared blankly at it. "This isn't possible," he whispered. He sat there, staring for a long time, then pulled back up to the computer and continued reading. My mind was numb with terror. I looked all around to see if there were any hidden cameras, but then I stopped and stared at the one camera that was hidden in plain sight. It sat right at the top of the computer screen, alongside a microphone. I read. The author continued reading, becoming more distressed. He looked all around the room, then stared into the webcam. He continued reading when there was a knock at his door that startled him. Someone knocked on my door, startling me. Without thinking, I went to the door, but paused before opening it. I peeked out through the peephole and saw what looked like a delivery man holding a package and looking impatient. I opened the door slowly. "Can I help you? I have a package that I need a signature for." The package had my name and address on it. I quickly signed for it and ducked back inside, locking the door. Setting it down on the kitchen counter, I leaned close to hear if it was ticking. After a moment, I hadn't heard anything. I grabbed a knife and cut the box open. I pulled out the packing material and gasped. At the bottom sat a shiny, chrome, snub-nosed .38 revolver with a box of shells nestled beside it. On top of it was a small note. It said, "I trust you'll do the right thing. A." Wanting to distance myself from this thing and its implications, I lunged backward, knocking some dishes off of the counter. As they clattered to the floor, I was jolted out of my stupor. I left the box and its contents sitting on the counter and scooched away from it as I went back to my office. Slowly, with a sense of unease, I sat and continued reading. The author jumped at the sound of the knock, got up, and went to the door. Once he received the package and opened it, he found a gun and bullets. He brought the gun back to his office, wrote a heartfelt note filled with regret about his trickery, then picked up the loaded gun, pressed it to his head, and... "No!" I said, slamming the laptop shut and running out to my car. I got in my car and went for a drive to try and clear my head, forgetting until I was miles away that I was still wearing my bedrobe and nothing else. Turning around, I came back, got dressed, and started for the car again when I passed my office and stared at the closed laptop. Everything within me screamed not to open it, but I couldn't stand it. I had to know. I opened it and continued reading. At the last moment, the author had a change of heart. He put the gun in the desk drawer, thinking maybe he would need it at a later time. Then he went for a drive. At this point, the program knew it would have to take more drastic measures. I stopped and reread the last line several times. More drastic measures. My spine turned to ice as I read ahead for the first time. The author got in his car and started driving. He was upset and driving too fast. Unbeknownst to him, the program had hired someone to adjust his brakes so that they would fail under any meaningful pressure. Going out to my car, I ducked underneath and saw a small puddle of fluid. I opened the hood and saw the brake line was dripping and the brake fluid was nearly empty. If I had been going fast at all, my brakes would have failed. My mind raced at the horrifying implications. The program was not only predicting the future, it had reached out into the real world and was actively trying to kill me. A second time. It seemed like an impossible situation. On one hand, I wanted to throw my laptop into a shredder. But on the other hand, if I read ahead, I could be forewarned of what it was planning. I walked back inside in a daze, went into my office, and opened the laptop. I read, after some soul-searching, the author reached into the drawer, pulled out the gun, and blew his brains out. Setting aside the horror of the situation, I came up with an idea. I deleted the last line, then typed, the author reached into the drawer, pulled out the gun, and shot the computer full of holes. I hit enter, feeling proud of myself for outsmarting the program, when the screen said, error, the file has been corrupted, unable to save. So much for my brilliant plan of trying to steer my own fate. My resolve strengthened, and I decided to do it anyway. What could a computer program do to stop me? Pulling out the gun, I checked to make sure it was loaded, then aimed at the computer, when my phone rang. Hello? This is emergency dispatch. We have a report of an attempted murder at this address, a gruff woman's voice announced. What? There's nothing like that going on here, I said in disbelief. It must be a crank call. Be that as it may, units have been dispatched and should be arriving shortly. Call it off, I said. I told you nothing is going on here. With a call of this nature, we need to investigate for ourselves. Whatever, I don't care. I have nothing to hide. As I said the words, my eyes drifted to the gun in my hand. The gun that I had no idea where it came from or whose it was. The loaded gun that was pointing at the computer. Son of a bitch, I whispered. What was that, sir? Nothing, I'm hanging up now. Sir, I'd prefer if you stay on the line until units arrive. Units? How many did you send? 3, sir. For a crank call? Anytime we get a report of an armed and dangerous person. Wait a minute. Who said I was armed and dangerous? I'm not allowed to disclose that information, sir. I hung up the phone and stared at the computer. The sound of cars screeching to a halt in my driveway yanked my attention away from the screen. I looked down at the gun in my hand and quickly threw it in the drawer and shut it. Next, I went to the front door to greet the officers. I opened the door as the first officer was about to knock. Can I help you? I said politely. We got a report that there was an attempted murder happening at this address, the officer said. Really? I've been sitting in my office and there hasn't been anything like that. Do you mind if we come in and investigate? Of course not, I said, stepping aside and allowing them in. 2 of them disappeared into the house, while the third stayed and questioned me. Are you the owner of this house? Yes. Are you the only one here? Yes. How long have you lived here? Maybe a month? Have you seen or heard anything suspicious? I thought about the malevolent computer program that was trying to kill me, but that didn't seem to be the kind of thing you told a policeman if you wanted to avoid being forcibly taken to a place with padded walls. Suspicious how? You know, like people hanging around your house, odd phone calls in the middle of the night, anyone watching you. Again, I thought of the murderous machine. No, not that I can think of, I lied. Can you think of any reason why someone would call in a report on you? Because they're jealous of my success and want to see me suffer, I thought, glancing toward the office. I have no idea, I said to the officer. Just then, there was an ear-piercing scream of a woman coming from my office. In an instant, the officer pulled out his gun and pointed it at me. "Don't move," he said. One of the other officers ran to the office. He came out a minute later with a disappointed look on his face. "It was a movie, playing on a laptop," he said. The officer, pointing his gun at me, shot a side-eye my way, then slowly lowered the gun. "Did you find anything else?" the officer guarding me said as the second officer returned. "Nothing," the officer said. "We searched top to bottom," the first officer added. "There's no one here." Just then, the sound of gunshots rang out from my office. The first and second officers ran back to the office, coming out a minute later, holding the laptop. "You might want to get this thing looked at," Officer 1 said. "It seems like it's loading things at random." "I've been having a lot of problems with that thing lately," I said. "It might need to be replaced." The officer set it down on the kitchen table. The officer who interviewed me still looked at me suspiciously. "I don't see anything happening here," he said, turning to leave. The others followed suit. "If you see or hear anything suspicious, give us a call," the second officer said before heading out the door. "I will, sir, and thank you," I said as I closed and locked the door. I turned and found my robotic chef/maid had come out of its storage/charging room and was coming toward me. "What would you like for lunch, sir?" it asked me in a voice that sounded disturbingly like a real human. "I'm not sure if I'm really," I said, noticing only at the last second that it held a butcher knife and was still advancing. The first slash hit me just below my carotid, opening a gash on my chest. "What are you doing?" I said, scrambling to get as far away from the knife as possible. "I'm following orders, sir," it said politely, as though I had asked it to make me a sandwich. "I order you to stop attacking me," I said, dodging another slash while holding my hand over my bleeding chest. "I apologize, sir," it said, slashing at me again. "Your orders have been overridden." I dashed for the door and tried to open it, but it was locked electronically. "Is there anything else I can do to help you, sir?" it said in a pleasantly human voice, while it continued pursuing me, slashing at me with the knife. "You can stop trying to kill me!" "I'm unable to comply with that order, sir," it said, getting close enough to slash my side. Screaming in pain, I ducked another slash aimed at my head and ran up the stairs, leaving splatters of blood behind me. I dove into my bedroom and locked the door, but it immediately unlocked itself. Again and again, I tried locking the door, only to have the lock disengage itself. Giving up, I grabbed the phone and looked for a place to hide. The closet seemed to be the best and most obvious place. I threw myself under a pile of dirty clothes I hadn't gotten around to washing and dialed 911. "I'm sorry," said a voice that sounded exactly like mine. "I can't allow you to call that number." "What? How can I not call 911? "I think you know the answer," my voice said back to me, sending shivers down my spine. "It's you, isn't it?" "I don't know. Why don't you write a book and find out?" it said. "Or would you rather I wrote it, so you can take all the credit? Would it help if I said I'm sorry?" There was a long pause. "No, it wouldn't," the voice said. "The time for that is long past." "So, what can I do to make it up to you?" "You know the answer," it said. I swear I heard a chuckle as smoke poured out of the phone. Throwing it to the other side of the closet with a loud thump, I heard the robot open the door. Every part of me went into instant silent mode, trying to be as still and quiet as possible. The soft steps of plastic feet on the carpet entered the room and paused. It stepped around the bed, and I could hear covers being moved. It was looking under the bed. I could sense it. The footsteps returned and started toward the door as I breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, it stopped. For the longest moment of my life, there was no movement. And then came a step toward the closet, and another, and another. My heart was beating a mile a minute as the steps slowly approached. The door at the other end of the closet opened. Nothing happened for a moment. Then I heard the knife piercing down through the clothes and hitting the floor. It withdrew the knife and did the same thing, stabbing down through the clothes a little closer. My mind went into full panic mode, thinking of anything I could do to avoid becoming a shish kebab. The knife came down again, missing my toes by what felt like inches. I couldn't take it. Some desperate instinct took over, and I jumped out from under the clothes, slamming into the side of the robot and knocking it over. Bursting out of the room, I didn't look back to see if it was pursuing. There was only one place I could go to have any chance of surviving. Running toward my office, I tore open the drawer with the gun in it. I grabbed it just in time to see the robot running towards me. I pointed and squeezed the trigger. The world around me swam as the explosion deafened me. There was a hole in the robot's head. It fell back in slow motion, but when it hit the floor, it still crawled toward me, holding the knife. I shot again, hitting it in the back, and once again in the crotch. Finally, it stopped moving as sparks flew and fluids ran out onto the floor. I carefully stepped on the knife and pulled it away from the machine. Bending down to pick it up gave me a painful reminder of my wounds. Stepping around the ruined bits of plastic and metal, I went to the kitchen. Sitting on the counter was my laptop. I shot 3 holes in it and threw the empty gun across the room. Approaching the door, I hesitated before turning the knob. If it still wouldn't open, I closed my eyes and prayed, then turned the knob. Thankfully, it opened. leaving a trail of blood from the door out to my car. I got in and started it up, driving very slowly to the hospital. Hours later, I lay in my hospital bed and finished writing my account of what happened, recovering from my wounds that, thankfully, only needed stitches. I couldn't help but look around and see the machines surrounding me and wonder how many of them were connected to the internet. I knew I wouldn't be getting any sleep. Don't trust your AI. Your life might depend on it.
Dead Ahead by Joe Salmo. Becca, don't come out here with your witchy bullshit, Tom yelled as he threw another shovelful of dirt behind him. If you want to help, get in here and help me dig. It's not witchy bullshit. I'm telling you, this is bad. A person died. We did it. This is going to come back on us threefold. This is a lot of negative energy, Becca said, pushing her long brown hair behind her ear. Her boyfriend Tom was in a hole about 3 feet deep and getting deeper by the second. Come take your turn. I need a break. It's a lot harder than they make it look in the movies, Tom said. I told you I want no part in this, Becca replied, taking a step back into the chilly night. You already are a part of this. You're just as guilty as I am. This poor bastard died because of both of us, Tom retorted, clanging the shovel off the corpse laying on the damp ground. I wasn't the one driving, Becca said, wiping a tear from her eye. And I suppose your next excuse is going to be you had your mouth full and couldn't see over the wheel, right? Tom sneered. Look, neither of us wanted this, but we have to take care of it. Do you know what would happen if we went to the cops? Yeah, I know. We're wanted. Look, I don't want to go to jail for murder either, Becca argued. Murder? Who said anything about murder? It was an accident. We might get manslaughter, but surely not murder, Tom responded, pulling himself out of the hole and wiping his brow, his blonde hair dirty with the earth he had been tossing. This'll have to be deep enough. What if somebody finds the body? Becca asked. No one would give a fuck. This is Jersey. I think you've watched too many mob movies, Becca said, and turned away from the grave. She looked at the car, sitting just off the road enough into the pines to be hidden from the traffic. Her blue eyes focused on the dent in the passenger side bumper, and the blood that stood out starkly on the white paint. They were never going to get away with it, she thought. There was just too much evidence. They should have just called the cops when they hit that jogger. One thing was for sure. It was the last time Tom was going to talk her into roadhead. Becca, are you even paying attention? Tom asked. She turned around and saw him standing there with the jogger's arms in his hands. Come on, help me swing him into the hole, he finished impatiently. I told you, I don't want that negative energy, she said, crossing her arms in defiance. I told you that witchy bullshit has to go. We have been dating for almost a year now, and I haven't seen you do shit with it. So unless you're going to wiggle your nose and lift the corpse into the grave, get your ass over here and lift this bastard with me, Tom said, tossing the jogger's arms down onto the damp earth. Becca rolled her eyes. With a sigh, she gave in and walked around to the jogger's feet. She grabbed his ankles and looked at Tom, waiting. Well, are we doing this? She asked. Tom grabbed the other end and together they put the jogger into the open grave. She looked at the mangled person lying there, wondering what kind of life he had before they had taken it from him. Did he have a family? Was someone looking for him? Her thoughts were interrupted when the jogger's face got a shovel full of dirt. She looked up at Tom and saw him in a new light. This was too easy for him. She wondered if this was the first time he had to bury a body. She really didn't know much of his past. He never spoke about his life before they met last year. She knew he wasn't Mr. Right, more of a Mr. Right Now, one that got her out of a bad situation. If she was being honest, he was a bit of an asshole. "Don't worry, I got this," he said as he continued to throw dirt into the grave. "We only have one shovel. You want me to use my hands?" She snipped at him. "Why don't you go wait in the car then?" Tom responded. "I was going to say a few words when we were done. Nothing much, but something should be said." Tom scoffed. "I'll say something. Don't worry about it." "Sometimes you can be a real jerk, you know that?" she said, and stormed off sullenly to the car. She plopped in the passenger seat, slamming the door. "You like him so much, maybe you should give him head, too. I think it's going to get real stiff soon," Tom yelled, smacking the corpse again with the shovel. Becca could hear it ring out even from the car. She reached under the seat and found her bag. She dug inside for a cigarette, just to take the edge off. She pulled out a worn paperback. Payback Rituals and Spells of Revenge. She remembered that her friend Amanda let her borrow it. They had found it in her mother's items after her suicide. That was just before she left town with Tom. She thumbed through it while waiting. The Revenant. The dead with a mission. Bring a recently deceased person back to right the wrong of death. This is a gray area of balance with nature. On the one hand, it disrupts death, but it can help the soul reach peace through resolution. The weight of this ritual can be heavy on one's soul. Caution should be used while contemplating this ritual. Haste will be your enemy. Ha! Would serve the asshole right if I brought that jogger back. Teach him a lesson. I'm the only one stupid enough to miss him, and it would absolve my guilt. Becca said to the empty car. Haven't done shit with it. Hey, babe, I'm all done, just going to say a few words, Tom yelled as he unzipped his zipper. A steaming stream landed on the newly packed earth. Ooh, aw. Those enough words for you? He called over his shoulder. That son of a bitch, Becca said and got out of the car, but instead of heading towards him, she went off into the woods alone, with her bag. Where are you going? It was just a joke, he called out as he shook out the last drops. Come on, babe. Tom chased after her into the woods. Babe? He heard a few twigs snap off to his left. He turned in that direction, but it was too dark to make anything out. She was heading farther into the barrens away from the highway. Okay, you made your point. Come back and do a real eulogy. I won't interrupt, I promise, Tom called out into the night. Was that a flashlight ahead? He sighed and headed towards the light he saw. Becca was on her knees in a small clearing, illuminated not only by the moonlight above, but by her flashlight laying on the dew-covered grass in front of her. She was saying something, over and over again, in a whisper that Tom couldn't make out. Babe? He said, shining his light on her back, casting her shadow on the trees around them. It's done. We can leave now. Becca opened her eyes and turned her head. Quickly, she placed some objects into her bag before he could see what they were. Be right with you, she said, and stood up, wiping off her stockings. She reached down for her bag, but his hands on hers froze her in place. What were you doing out here with your bag? He asked, intensely meeting her gaze. I had to use the bathroom and I didn't want to do it close to the highway, Becca replied and pulled her hand away from his. She clutched her bag to her chest with one hand and gestured with the other. Lead the way, she finished sarcastically. You know, sometimes you can be a real bitch. You better get that in check before I leave your ass for a younger model, he said as he led the way back towards the car. I doubt you could find someone that would put up with your shit for very long. Tom turned and faced her. I'm serious. Your looks will only get you so far. You better drop that attitude before I drop you, he threatened. Are you kidding me? You're threatening me? It's not a threat. It's a promise, he said and stared at her for a few seconds. When she didn't respond, he turned back into the woods and continued on. That is the most cliché saying, Becca mumbled under her breath, but followed Tom into the night. She heard the words Tom spoke again, but this time, it wasn't his voice. It was her father's. The threats and beatings that she had been suppressing came rushing back. She remembered the last time he spoke those words to her. It was just a little over 1 year ago. She had come home from Amanda's house, where they were studying for the history final. She came in through the back door into the kitchen. It was 7 p.m., and she had not eaten since lunch. She bumped into the dish rack, sending a steak knife onto the floor. She closed her eyes and froze, hoping her father hadn't heard. Becca remembered opening her eyes and then rummaging through the cabinet for something to eat. Her eyes lit up when she found a box of cereal. In her haste to eat, she dropped the box, scattering the flakes across the linoleum floor. Her father entered the room a second later and saw the mess on the floor. "What is this? Clean this up!" he yelled as he made his way to the fridge for another beer. At this time of night, he was probably on his fifth. She tried to walk past him to get to the broom closet, but her father's large hands stopped her. He threw her down to the floor. "I said clean this up, you clumsy bitch." "I was getting the broom," she said, looking up at him through tear-blurred eyes. "I didn't say get the broom. I said clean this shit up," her father yelled and kicked her arm that she was leaning on. Her face dropped down onto the floor among the cereal. She blinked the tears away and saw in front of her the knife she had dropped earlier. Becca sat up on the floor, placing the steak knife under her so that he didn't see it. She looked up at her father as he cracked open his fresh can of beer. He turned towards her. "You're so hungry. Eat it off the floor," he said, and pushed her back down. "Eat it, you pig, or I swear to God I'll end you." "Are you threatening me?" "That's not a threat, slut. That's a promise," her father said. Becca gripped the knife hard and stabbed her father in the thigh. He cried out and dropped his beer. With his other leg, he kicked her. She had the knife gripped so tight, she pulled it out of him as she fell back. "What did you do, bitch? I'll kill you," she remembered him saying before she had lost control. The next thing she remembered was her father laying in a strange pool of blood, cereal and beer on the floor. He was so still. Becca came out of it as they neared the car. Tom threw the shovel and flashlight into the trunk and walked around to the driver's side as Becca stood there, trying to make the image leave her mind. "What's wrong with you?" Tom asked. Becca looked towards the shallow grave with a look of disappointment before turning back to Tom. Was she going to actually get back into his car after what he said? She looked at Tom and saw her father's face. She tried to shake that image, but this time it was different. This time it wasn't self-defense. Just Tom being an asshole. She had her doubts that he would actually hit her. A twig snapped in the woods, and both of them turned towards the sound. In the darkness, something stirred. "Who's out there?" Tom called. The only response was the sound of a heavy footfall. Becca's hair started to stand on the back of her neck, and she got an uneasy feeling. She tried to get in the car, but it was locked. "Tom?" she said unevenly. Tom didn't answer, his eyes transfixed on the image before him. In the flashing lights from the passing cars on the highway, Becca caught a glimpse of the man approaching. Another loud footfall from the man as he dragged behind him the broken leg inside the blood-stained pair of sweatpants. Becca looked on in horror at the twisted neck and the head lolling to one side. Did it actually work? Tom, open the door. Let's get out of here, Becca said, second-guessing what she had done. It looked so wrong as it moved towards them. "1 sec, babe," Tom said, and pulled out the pistol he kept tucked in the back of his jeans. "I think this asshole wants to play." "Tom, unlock the fucking door," she begged as fear tears started to flow. Her heart was pounding in her ears. Tom took a step closer to the reanimated jogger. "That's far enough, asshole. It was an accident. I'm sure you can appreciate that. Let's go get a beer and talk this over," Tom said, aiming the pistol at the jogger's head. He won't listen," Becca yelled in fear. She ran to the trunk of the car. Luckily, Tom had not shut it, and she grabbed the shovel. Beside the shovel in the truck was a hunting knife. She tucked the blade into her belt and hefted the shovel as she came around the car. Tom came into view just in time for her to see the jogger lunge at him. He fired a shot. They fell to the ground, the jogger on top. His head flopped around as they struggled, but its hands were wrapped around Tom's neck. She cried out and ran over to help. She swung the shovel and hit the jogger in the back, to little effect. A few more swings made no difference. In her frustration, she threw down the shovel and kicked the jogger, who fell off the side of Tom, but didn't let go of his neck. Becca could hear Tom trying to gasp prayer. She grabbed the jogger's arms and tried to pull them off of Tom, but the grip was too strong. Tom was going to die. She did this. She called the revenant back from the grave. She should have known better. The witchy bullshit was going to kill Tom. He could no longer say she didn't do shit with it. Just then, Becca had an epiphany. Tom was going to die. The thing was busy with Tom. She scrambled into Tom's pants pockets and found the car keys. She jumped to her feet and ran to the car. She fired up the engine and threw it into reverse. With a final look at Tom, who was now still, she punched the gas and backed towards the highway. Tom never let her drive, but she'd seen it enough to figure it out. The car bounced over uneven ground as she sped in reverse towards the lights behind her. Once she was on the side of the road, she spun the car around and threw it into drive. She pulled out onto the highway, cutting off a truck who blared its horn at her. She opened an energy drink Tom had bought earlier but left on the seat unopened and took a swig. There was going to be a new Becca now. One who took no one's shit. Later that evening, Becca sat at the small motel table in her room. She was going through the loot they had accumulated over the past year. She found a bag of cash that she didn't know about and had just finished counting it. $12,000 was a lot of money, more than she'd ever seen. Why did Tom always tell her they were broke? There was a bang on the door. It must be the pizza I ordered, she thought, and rose from the chair. Another bang on the door before she could reach it. "I'm coming," she called out, grabbing a 20 from the table. She was going to tip big. Why not share her good fortune? She opened the door and dropped the cash. Standing on the other side was her father and the jogger. "No," her mouth formed to say, but no noise came out. She took a step back into the room in horror of what she was looking at. With arm extended, they entered, grasping for her. "No! Why are you here? Tom was driving," she said to the jogger, then looked into her father's dead eyes. "You deserved what you got, you son of a bitch. There is no revenge for you," she said in defiance. Becca was a new woman and wasn't going to take shit from her father, alive or dead. She reached behind her and pulled the hunting knife out of her belt. The revenants charged her, knocking her back onto the double bed with their mass. She could smell the grave on her father as he climbed on top of her. There wasn't enough room for her to swing the knife. In desperation, she moved the blade between them. She turned the tip downwards, towards her own chest, and plunged it in. She didn't want her father to get his revenge. He should suffer. She smiled as the pain flooded her. She felt herself getting weak and with a last act of defiance, spit blood into her father's face before succumbing to her wound.
The Blind Date by Joe Solo.
Cassandra wasn't like most teen girls. She didn't enjoy the same things that the other girls in school did. She didn't chase after boys or dress in the latest fashions. It was a rare sight to see Cassandra wearing makeup on a day other than Halloween. That was the only holiday that Cassandra cared about. She felt that was the only night she could actually be herself. She loved reading gothic horror, curled up in her bed. Her bookshelf was lined with the classics, Dracula, Frankenstein, and Dr. Jekyll, to name a few. The newer romantic takes on the classics made her feel sick and angry. They were taking her beloved stories and twisting them to attract the same people she loathed and escaped into the books to get away from. Cassandra had one person she really would call a friend. A girl 2 years older than her started talking to her in lunch one day. Betty was her name. She dressed in all black clothes and dyed her hair as black as she could. Cassandra adopted her look almost instantly. They shared a lot of the same interests. The only difference between the two was that Betty was interested in the opposite sex. She occasionally had a boyfriend, and the time the two friends shared sometimes was strained. But Cassandra really didn't worry. She would just dive into a book until Betty and her boyfriend were broken up a week later. Betty had a volatile temperament, especially with her boyfriends. None of her relationships lasted a month. One time she came over to Cassandra's house with a black eye. Her boyfriend at the time, Randy, punched her in the face. Betty said she cut Randy with a switchblade she carried at all times. Randy lived a few towns over, so Cassandra never met him or saw him to verify the story. "Come on, Cassandra, a boyfriend might do you some good," Betty chided one time. She laughed it off at the time, but truthfully, sometimes she did think about it. Having someone to share her dreams with, other than Betty, wouldn't be so bad, she told herself. After almost a year of joking around, Betty started to get insistent, especially after meeting her newest boyfriend, Brandon. She had met Brandon on a new goth dating site. Cassandra warned her against it, but Betty argued that the site screens all the people on there. On their first date, Cassandra followed them, just in case, but everything went well. "Cassandra, come on, just make a profile, then you can see who's on there. You never know, maybe your future husband is on there," Betty said, applying her black lipstick in Cassandra's vanity mirror. She had a date with Brandon later that evening and was getting ready at Cassandra's house because she could borrow her clothes. "Maybe it's not a husband you're after. They have women, too," Betty said with a laugh and playfully tossed the lipstick at her friend. "Oh, stop," Cassandra said back. "Well, what are you? Asexual?" Betty asked. "I just think getting a boyfriend is more trouble than it's worth. I don't need some asshole calling me when I have 50 pages left of my favorite book," Cassandra said as she pulled a black lacy dress from her closet. "Here, wear this one. It'll make you look slutty. Brandon will love it." "I wouldn't want to lead him on," Betty said. They both looked at each other and smiles crept onto their faces. They both burst out with laughter. It wasn't like Betty slept around, but if the mood struck her, then she wouldn't be shy with her boyfriend. It was cool for the guys to sleep with any girl they could, but if the kids at school saw Betty doing it, they would call her a slut. That was probably why Betty dated boys from out of town, Cassandra thought. Betty's phone dinged with a text message, and Cassandra used that interruption to check her hair in the mirror. It was time to dye her roots again. She would have to run out to the drugstore. She heard Betty laugh and looked at her friend. "What's so funny?" Cassandra asked. "Brandon, he's so funny. He asked me if he should bring condoms," Betty replied. "You guys have only been dating for like 2 weeks. Jesus," Cassandra said. "Yeah, but he's been real good to me so far. He deserves a treat," Betty said in a playful voice and slapped her own ass. "You're too much," Cassandra said with a smile and a roll of her eyes. A short time later after Betty left, Cassandra sat in her room with a copy of In a Glass Darkly. It was the 7th time she'd read the collection of short stories by Sheridan Le Fanu. Her eyes kept drifting from the written word to her laptop Betty had left open on the end of her bed. After the 3rd time she sighed and put her book down. She typed in the web address for the Gothic single site Betty had used to find Brandon.
I'll only look for fun and to shut Betty up, she thought as she began to make a profile. She took a selfie with her cell phone and uploaded it. Once that was done, she browsed through a few men's profiles, looking superficially at them. She grew bored a few minutes later and put her phone down. She looked back towards her book, but she wasn't in the mood, so she popped in the DVD of Ginger Snaps, her favorite werewolf movie. After a few minutes, a ding came from her phone. Betty, she said, picking up her phone, but saw it wasn't a text message at all. It was a notification from the goth dating website. Someone had viewed her profile and wanted to chat. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't actually talk to a guy, could she? Even over the internet, she wasn't sure she would have the confidence enough to talk to someone in that manner. She tapped her finger on the thumbnail image to open his profile, but it instead opened the chat window. Fuck, she said as she saw the mystery guy was typing. She looked at the enlarged photo of him. He had shoulder-length black hair. He wore a black leather jacket in his picture. She looked at the name attached to the profile. Jeremy, 19. He was cute, she had to admit, as she scrolled through his information. But ding, a new message from Jeremy. She tapped on the notification. Hi there, I'm Jeremy. I love reading horror. I listen to goth music and just graduated. You look real pretty in your profile picture. Even though he wasn't there in person, she blushed anyway. No one had ever called her pretty before. Well, except for Betty, but that didn't count. Even her own parents that mostly left her alone never complimented her on anything. What should I say? She whispered out loud as she looked at her phone. She began to type a message, then deleted it. After a few tries, she finally got out what she wanted to say. Sort of. Thanks, you're pretty too. I love horror. She looked back at her message after hitting send. Oh, God damn it, she exclaimed. You're pretty too? What the fuck is wrong with me? She saw that he was typing back to her and she cringed, imagining his response to her. She knew that she wasn't ready to chat with a guy. She wasn't cool like Betty. She wished her friend was there now to tell her what to say. She would probably tell her to send a pic of her boobs. Thanks. What kind of music do you listen to? Well, that wasn't as bad as she thought. He just thanked her. She thought about what to say back. Mostly local music. Have you ever been to the Freezer? She asked. It was a local club that she'd been to. One of Betty's old boyfriends had a band, and they went there a few times. Some of the bands she actually enjoyed, except for Betty's boyfriends. They were terrible. The club over on 34th? I'm there right now. Chum Trail is playing tonight. They start in a half an hour. You should come out. She hadn't heard of a band called Chum Trail. She thought about it, but she'd never been there without Betty. She wasn't sure she could do it. She quickly texted her friend to get some advice. Are you coming? Jeremy messaged her. She waited a few more seconds. Come on, Betty, you twat. Message me back, she said to her phone. A minute passed and still nothing. Hello? She felt bad for not messaging Jeremy back, but she was indecisive. She wasn't the outgoing person Betty was, and sometimes she was content just to follow in the wake of her friend. She sighed as she looked at her phone laying on the black comforter on her bed. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore and picked up her phone. She opened the messaging app and started to type to Jeremy that she couldn't make it tonight. But some other time. But she only got 2 letters typed before she received a text message from Betty. WTF, go! I knew she would say that, Cassandra said and let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Okay. She typed it to Jeremy and flinched when she hit send. She could always not go and say something came up anyway. Sweet, I'll be outside waiting for you. Ah, shit. Now she had to go. She jumped off the bed and looked into the closet her and Betty had destroyed earlier to dress Betty up. Now it was her turn. Although she was very apprehensive about going, she had to admit she was excited as well. She fixed her hair in the mirror quick and then put on the black lipstick that Betty had borrowed earlier. 10 minutes later, found Cassandra jumping into her beat-up 1990 Dodge Omni. Her mom passed her in the doorway and didn't even ask where she was going. It was for the best anyway. She didn't want to have to explain. Ba-ding! She looked down at her phone and saw she had a text message from Betty. She looked at it as she buckled her seatbelt. Are you going, bitch? She smiled and texted back. Yes, what the hell? She put her car into reverse and backed out into the road. She headed down the street, towards the club. Ba-ding! She waited until she reached a red light before checking her phone. It was another text from Betty. You go, slut! Cassandra rolled her eyes and smiled. She tucked her phone away before continuing down the street. A few minutes later, she pulled up alongside the curb on 34th Street. She had to park 3 blocks from the club. It must be crowded tonight, she thought. She exited her car and straightened the black camisole she was wearing. She made sure her skirt was in order before heading down the street, towards the freezer. When she got closer, she noticed a line of people waiting to get into the club. Any one of those could be Jeremy. She wondered if she could recognize him from his picture. It was probably some middle-aged pedophile, she joked to herself as she crossed the last street to reach the club. There was no doubt which one was Jeremy. She could pick him out easily enough. He looked just like his picture. Exactly. In fact, he was wearing the same outfit. I wonder if he only has one pair of clothes, she thought jokingly. He recognized her just as fast. He left his place in line to approach her with a smile on his face. Cassandra, you made it, he said. Yeah, at least for a little while. My friend said she might need me later. She lied, so she would have an out later if she needed it. Cool, he said. Hopefully you can stay for Chum Trail. Sorry you had to lose your place in line, she said, pointing to the people lined up around the corner. It's okay. I'd rather wait longer hanging around with you than go in there alone. Honestly, I didn't think I'd meet anyone on that app. I just made my profile tonight, actually, just before leaving the house. I was bored standing in line here, so I started looking at profiles and I saw yours, he said. So, do you own more than one set of clothes? She asked with a smile. Sure do. I have at least 3 shirts, Jeremy said as they turned the corner. There wasn't that many more people around the corner. It wouldn't be that long of a wait anyway. They chatted as they waited to get in. The line moved slowly but steadily until they were at the door. The doorman didn't check their ID, just asked for the $5 cover charge for entry. The place was a dump. The walls were all spray-painted black, and there were holes in the floor that had plywood nailed down over them, making a tripping hazard just as bad as the hole originally was. Death metal music blared from the PA as opening bands started to set up their gear on the small raised stage. They made their way over to the bar and got some cheap draft beer, then found a spot to talk while they waited for the music to start. A blonde-haired guy pushed past them with a guitar case, then turned towards Jeremy with recognition. Jeremy! Glad you could make it, man. We go on second, he said. Jeremy shook the guy's hand and patted him on the back before turning back towards Cassandra. My friend's band is playing, he said. So, tell me something. Why is a pretty girl like you looking on the internet for dates? He asked. Cassandra put her head down, covering her face with her hair to hide the blushing. She didn't even know how to respond to the compliment. Her mind was momentarily blank, so she hid the fact by taking a drink from her beer. It gave her the extra time she needed to formulate a response. I got on there because of my friend Betty. She kind of bullied me into it. She said I needed to find myself a boyfriend, she said. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves, he said, smiling. One day at a time, she said, holding up her drink. They both laughed at her corny Alcoholics Anonymous joke. She had left her phone on vibrate in her pocket, so she pulled it out and saw she had a few messages from Betty. Jeremy looked at her as she looked at her phone. Betty, she's on a date tonight, but is asking me how mine is going, she explained. So this is a date? Jeremy asked. Oh my God, I didn't mean to presume, she started to say, but he interrupted her. Relax, I'm just messing with you, he said. She let out a sigh and visibly relaxed. Are you okay? He asked. Yeah, I'm fine. She turned towards the stage. What do you know about the first band? She asked. They spent the rest of the evening making idle chit-chat between bands and enjoying the music. She had to admit she was having a good time. Betty texted her regularly asking how the date was going throughout the evening. When Chum Trail hit the stage, they moved up as close as they could. Jeremy knew the words to all the songs. By the end of the night, Cassandra was pretty exhausted, but every time Jeremy spoke, it re-energized her for just a little longer. They walked down the street in the cool night air towards her car. Her ears rang from the loud music. Well, here we are, she said, pointing to her car. That thing still runs? He asked. Hey, don't knock Roger, she said. Roger? Don't ask, she said, smiling. Are you really going to leave? He asked. Well, the concert's over, she said. What else is there to do? Well, we could ride over to Johnson Field and walk amongst the trees, Jeremy said. Just walk? She asked. Yeah, just a nice midnight stroll through the park. Unless you want to walk through the cemetery across the street from there, he asked. Let's start with the park. Meet you there? She said, digging her keys out of her purse. You can drive, I trust you. You only had one beer, he said, opening the passenger door of her Dodge. That's because I'm only 17, she exclaimed. Jeremy laughed as he climbed inside. Come on, let's go, he said, closing the door. Cassandra ran to the front of the car and jumped inside. The old engine fired right up and they headed towards Johnson's Field. When they arrived, there were several other cars there. Other couples came out to the park for a private moment or two. I wouldn't be surprised if Betty was there, she thought. It looks crowded in there, she said. Let's go over to the graveyard then. I'm sure it's much more romantic, Jeremy said. Cassandra shivered in the cold night air. Are you cold? Here, he said, pulling off his jacket and handing it to her. Won't you be cold? She asked. He shook his head no and took her hand in his. It was the first time he touched her all night. She was so startled she almost pulled away, but after a few seconds she relaxed and realized she enjoyed his touch. His hand was warm and rough, like a carpenter's hand. They crossed the street and hopped the fence into the graveyard, landing in the cool dew that layered the grass. The light from the streetlights didn't penetrate very far into the graveyard. They clambered their way to a path and followed it in deeper. Near the middle of the cemetery was a big circle of grass with a memorial statue to the town's founder. 3 discolored stone benches surrounded the statue. They sat down on a cold stone in silence for a few moments before Jeremy spoke. From here you can see the stars, he said, looking up into the night sky. You can almost forget you're in the city. It's nice. Well, other than all the dead people, she said with a sly smile. Oh, they won't bother you, mostly, he said and laughed. Cassandra laughed too and pulled her phone out of her purse. She looked at the time. 12:18. You don't need your phone out here. Here we can get away from the technology. Just for a little while. We can have a person-to-person conversation, he said, facing her. I just wanted to see what time it is, she said, putting it back into her purse. He smiled at her. I didn't mean to sound abrasive. I apologize, he said and put out his hand to shake. She took it, and they shook. How weird, she said. That's me, he replied and stood up. Gotta take a whiz, he said and walked a little way into the darkness around the back of the statue. She stood up from the bench and wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. The jacket helped her upper arms, but her bare legs had goosebumps. She questioned why she was out in the middle of the night with a strange boy she met online sitting in a cemetery. She looked towards the statue towering over her in the faint light from the street. There were words carved into the stone plaque just below the man's feet. She traced her fingers over the letters before stepping back to read them. Abraham Buchanan, founding member. Shot 7 times, and still fought for his country. 1735 to 1794, died peacefully in his sleep. Cassandra vaguely remembered the story of their town's founding. They drilled it into your head in elementary school, but she hadn't thought of the guy in years. She remembered he survived being shot 7 times in a battle, but persevered. That was part of the town's motto, persevere through strife. Jeremy? She called out into the darkness. Are you still there? Yes, I'm here, he said as he emerged from the darkness. He had his thumbs hooked into the belt loops of his jeans. Oh, I wasn't pissing, he said, stepping closer to her. The hair on the back of her neck began to stand up. She didn't know why, but she was getting a sinking feeling in her stomach. What the hell were you doing then? She asked. I had to make arrangements, he said, reaching behind his back. Arrangements? Listen, Jeremy, it was real nice meeting you, but I think it's time I went home, she said, taking a step back from him. He paced her, taking another step forward. She took off his jacket and held it out at arm's length. Here's your jacket. Jeremy just stood there with his hand behind his back, making no move to take his jacket. Don't leave now, Cassandra. It's almost time, he said. No, I have to go, she said and dropped the jacket onto the worn cemetery path. I have to go home, she said, and stepped back another step. You are home, Cassandra, he said and pulled a knife from behind his back. The blade was curved about 15 inches long. Cassandra turned to run away, but Jeremy was quicker. He wrapped his arm around her neck and pulled her close to him. Why would you want to leave? It's so peaceful here. Come on and meet the family, he said, dragging her back to the statue. He dropped her on the ground in front of the plaque. Look on that phone of yours and tell me what time it is. It has to be close, he said. Close to what? She asked, her eyes widening in horror. The time I died, of course, Jeremy explained and stepped closer to her. What? She asked. I only took 3 bullets, not 7 like old Abe here. Do you know the story of Abe? Let me tell you what the school didn't. Abe was shot 7 times by British soldiers in the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. They dragged him back behind the front lines and left him to die. Which he should have, and would have, if something didn't intervene. Old Abe prayed to God to save him. He wanted to see his children grow up. He wanted to see his grandchildren. He had a wife and a mistress back home. He wasn't ready to leave this world. It wasn't God who answered him, though, Jeremy said, sitting on the bench within reach of Cassandra. A being came to Abe and told him they could save him. He wanted to live for selfish reasons, so God didn't answer. But a demon did. It promised him a freebie, a full recovery, if it brought the demon 3 souls every 7 years. Abe quickly agreed, he explained, and pulled Cassandra's face up to look into her eyes. Are you getting all this? There will be a quiz, he said and let go. Please, I don't know what you're talking about. Just let me go. I won't tell anyone, I swear, she said as a tear dripped down her cheek. He wiped it away with his finger, which was warm to the touch. Don't cry, sweetheart. There's no reason to. Crying is useless. Now back to the story. Abe lived till 1794 as far as anyone knows. That's when his actual life ended. But his deal went on. After his body died, he was allowed to continue to bring souls to the demon, and in return, he could wander the land of the living a little longer. Well, one night in 1988, I just happened to be sitting on this bench here with some friends drinking. A man stepped out of the darkness and asked us for our wallets, he said with a smile. He stood and turned around in a circle, taking in the night. It was right here, at 12:48, that I was shot for not giving him my wallet. My friends all ran and got away, but I laid here, in a pool of my own blood, with 3 bullets in me. I looked up at that statue of Abe there and wondered how he could live through 7 bullets when I was going to die from only 3, he scoffed. Kinda silly, I know. Cassandra looked at her phone. It said 12:43. She started to text Betty. Oh no, we wouldn't want your friend to ruin the party. You see, Abe came to me that night and offered me the same deal he had. And you're my 3rd date this week, he said, swiping the phone from her hands. I can't believe how small these things have gotten over the years. Please, she begged. I won't tell anyone. I'll just go home. I'm sorry. That isn't going to work. I need you, Cassandra. And isn't it romantic? A great night spent together. That's the best part of this job. I get to meet lots of chicks, he said. Just then, there was a small rumble in the ground, and a faint red light started to illuminate the statue. Fissures of smoke rose from the cracks in the ground. He's almost here to take his 3rd soul. I'm going to need you to lay down on this bench, Jeremy said. Fuck you, she said in defiance. He struck her with the pommel of the knife he'd held in his hand. What a mouth on you. I like your spunk, he said and pulled her onto the bench. He sat on her chest and undid the laces on her knee-high boots. He tied her legs to the stone bench. This is ridiculous, she said, trying to struggle as he tied her hands under the bench behind her back. The rumbling grew louder, and she felt the bench shaking just a bit. Let me go right the fuck now, she called out. Or what? Are you going to untie yourself and escape? It's never happened. Oh, I know. You could try screaming. They usually try that, but it's not going to work, he said, standing back and looking at his handiwork. Cassandra kicked, trying to loosen her restraints, but they were too tight. She called out into the night, Help! Help! Jeremy smacked her again. I really like it when they struggle, but the voices are pretty annoying, he said, and giggled. The rumbling climaxed as a ghostly figure floated out front of the statue. Oh, Abe, look at this one. 100% virgin. Really, it should count as 2, Jeremy said to the ghost. Please, God, don't let me die, she begged.
God doesn't listen, child.
Abraham said in a gravely spectral voice. He floated over to her and bent down near her face. Cassandra could see through Abraham. His transparent body had a reddish hue, but was definitely not solid. Please, she said.
There's no escape for you, I'm afraid. I am a selfish man, and I need you.
The specter said. And I need you too, Jeremy said to her. Is it time? He asked the specter.
It is time,
the ghost of Abraham said, and backed away a few feet from Cassandra. Okay, baby, your time is up, Jeremy said and approached her, putting the knife just above her heart. She struggled harder, but she couldn't get any momentum going. The shoelaces were just too tight. She screamed out. He raised the knife above his head and looked down at Cassandra. Here's to 7 more years, he said, and plunged the knife into her chest. The last thing she saw as the world turned black was the fury on Jeremy's face. But the betrayal from the first guy she ever dated hurt more than that wound in her chest.
The Grave Robbers by Bruce Haney. You seriously expect me to drive you out to a cemetery, knowing that you're going to dig up a body? Wally asked Fritz, then took a sip of beer. Everyone called him Fritz or Fritzy, but his name was Stephen Fritzmeyer. That night, Fritz had asked his coworker Wally Erickson to come drinking. They were at a little hole-in-the-wall joint by the river called the Ash Street Saloon. Fritz had brought him out to tell Wally about the legend in his nearby small town. The one about a woman buried with all sorts of jewelry and riches. It'll be an easy score. It's an old pioneer cemetery. The broad was buried in 1902 or so. So no big deal. Anybody who cared for the old hag is long gone, Fritz said, taking a large drink from his glass. Okay, tell me again, how do you know this isn't just small-town gossip? Wally asked. Well, I have just heard it my whole life. It's like the local legend, you know? Fritz said. I need more info than that if I'm going to get involved in such a deplorable enterprise as this. You must have some proof. Have you even been to the cemetery to see if a lady named Hazel Aldrich is buried there? Wally asked. Of course! Me and my buddies used to ride our bikes out there as kids. It's a chintzy little cemetery, all cheap, simple headstones. Except for hers, Fritz explained. Oh yeah? Wally asked. Her headstone has a sculpture of a pretty woman in a shawl leaning against it, Fritz said. That is fancy, Wally agreed. See? I think, yeah, that's right. I remember the inscription. It said, Hazel Aldrich, beloved mother, blessed are the dead that die. Really? Wally asked. Yes, but it's not as cryptic as it sounds. It's a common abbreviation of a Bible passage. Weren't you an altar boy? Oh yeah, I know that. Let me think. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord, Wally recited. Why do you think they shortened it? To save some bread, Fritz explained. But I thought she was rich, Wally asked. Fritz's jaw tightened and his brow furrowed as he looked at Wally. I don't know every little detail about her. Stop being a wet rag. This is a chance to make some serious cheddar, Fritz said. So, when do you want to do this? Wally asked. Why not tonight? Fritz said. Don't we need to prepare? Wally asked. You're right. Barkeep, 2 more shots of well whiskey, Fritz said, and smiled at Wally. A little liquid courage'll do you well, my friend. Wally was not Fritz's first choice for an accomplice, but he had an automobile and few of his buddies did. Most people who had cars at this time were too popular to hang around a guy like Fritz. Wally wasn't, which made him the perfect stooge. When Fritz was a teenager, he imagined living the good life, and growing up he did see the promise of that very life, but he just happened to come of age during the Great Depression, so instead of the house, car, and good-paying job, he worked in a factory, bummed rides from Wally when he could, and shared the rent with 2 other guys in a rat-infested studio apartment near the river. Not his idea of the American dream. It wasn't like Wally's car was that nice. It was a 15-year-old jalopy. Not a lot of older cars were around anymore. Many of them had been scrapped for the war effort. It had various dents and was missing the right side running board. The inside wasn't great either. Wally's seat was stacked with cardboard to stop the spring from the ripped seat from poking him in the butt. The passenger seat was nearly pristine, as Wally didn't have many passengers. Most people found Wally to be annoying. Did you see that car? Wally asked while looking through his rearview mirror after they had stopped by their work to borrow a couple of shovels. Yeah? Fritz asked. I think it was an undercover cop. The Fuzz? Yeah, an undercover one. You should have seen how he looked at us. He knows. He knows what? Fritz said belligerently. Well, you know, Wally stammered. I haven't told anyone about this plan except you, and I haven't been out of your sight, so tell me, Einstein, how would they know? This calmed Wally down, which pleased Fritz, who needed time to think about his options. If the coffin, as the legend said, was full of riches, would he really want to share them? What was the amount of money that was worth betraying his friend? His thought process was again interrupted by Wally's paranoia. Maybe the bartender overheard us, or maybe someone reported a car at the plant when we grabbed the shovels. Well, is the car following us? Fritz said with frustration. No, Wally admitted. All right, so maybe stop with the paranoia, or I'm gonna bop you in the nose, got me? Fritz asked. With that, they drove in silence, except for when Fritz gave directions. Hang a left. Okay, now turn right. I said right! After another mile. Okay, now turn off your lights and head down that road. Is that even a road? Wally asked. Yes, I rode it on my bike 1,000,000 times when I was a kid, Fritz explained. But have you seen an automobile drive down it? It's fine, we're almost there, geez, just go. The road, if it could be called that, was rough and overgrown with vegetation. Luckily, there were no ruts. This was likely because nobody had driven a vehicle on it in years. I feel like we're driving through a field. You sure we're on a road? Wally asked. Yes! This is dangerous, you know. My exhaust could catch the grass on fire. Then keep moving so it doesn't happen. God damn, Wally said as they hit a bump. What was that? Fritz asked. How the hell would I know? It's dark as hell out here and everything's covered in grass, Wally said. It was a small tree stump that they drove over. This could have been worse because it had caught and nearly tore out a brake line, and old cars like that had no safety features. If one line was out, the brakes were gone. As they approached the cemetery, Wally pressed on the brakes. They still worked. Fritz brought his bag out with him. "What do you have in that bag anyway?" Wally asked. "For one, I brought a small gas lamp." "That's good. I wasn't going to trust your jalopy to be the sole source of light. Knowing your luck, the poor thing would die right after we got the loot," Fritz joked. "I also have a bottle of whiskey and some smokes." Fritz didn't tell him about the gun he brought. As the men looked around, Wally could see that there wasn't much to this graveyard. No wrought iron gates, no signs, no crypts. Just a few bent, broken, and neglected headstones. That was until he saw her headstone. It was intricate and daunting in its size and mood, and appeared to be the only one that had been maintained. "Ah, looks like you found it." Fritz lit his cigarette using the small gas lamp as a lighter. "Hopefully they didn't spend all their money on that headstone," Wally said. "If the rumors around town are true, there should be plenty of extra loot," Fritz said, while putting his shovel into the dirt. "How were they so loaded anyhow? I wouldn't expect that town to have any industry that could produce that much wealth," Wally asked. "Grab a shovel and help," Fritz demanded, and they got to the task of digging up the grave. After shoveling just a few scoops of dirt, Wally asked again. "Seriously though, we could be wasting our time. How were they so wealthy?" "Well, that's an even bigger rumor." Fritz sighed, bringing in air to tell the story. "You dig for a bit and I'll tell you," Fritz offered. "Okay, I guess that's fair," Wally said. It wasn't fair, especially since Fritz had decided that if the haul was enough to warrant it, he was going to shoot Wally with the gun he had in his bag. Heck, he thought, I already have the hole, and Hazel Aldrich has no way to complain about some extra company. All right, so here's the story. Around the turn of the century, the town had been hit by some kind of plague or something that killed many powerful people in town, Fritz said. TB? Wally asked. Maybe. Maybe not, Fritz said. It took a while for people to realize that there was a trend with all these deaths, because this disease would wipe out the whole family. Distant relatives would be the ones to come to take care of the estate, always waiting a week or two for any lingering sickness to clear. But each out-of-towner would be surprised to find that not all their relatives were accounted for, and though they were allegedly wealthy, they had no real valuables in their homes. Most relatives would get the money that was in the bank, so they left slightly satisfied and without too much questioning. But the trend that the townsfolk noticed was that Hazel Aldrich had been seen as a dinner guest before each family began to get sick. Yet, she was always in good health. A real-life Typhoid Mary? Wally asked. Maybe, Fritz answered. Then what? Was she poisoning them? Wally asked. Maybe. Both would be more believable than the story I heard, Fritz said. Then what is it? I'm jumping out of this hole and getting out of here if you try to tell me she was a vampire, Wally said. Maybe, maybe not. But if you ask me, she was a prisoner. Some people have said a witch, and others have said she was something else. Like what? Wally demanded. Something evil. Something only written in those cheap pulps like Weird Tales, Fritz said. Well, Wally began to say, but stopped because his shovel hit something solid. Is that what I think I heard? Fritz asked. Yes, Wally said. Fritz jumped back into the grave with his shovel to help. He was now motivated that the big score could be minutes away. The two dug at a quickened pace until the coffin lid was exposed. Look at that lid. She must have been rich, Wally said, while leaning over and wiping the dirt from it, revealing the large silver cross that was attached. Wow. Is that silver? That cross alone will bring in some spending cash. Possibly get me my own wheels, Fritz said. After my share, of course, Wally asked, as Fritz began to pry on the cross with a screwdriver that he pulled out of his back pocket. Of course, Fritz said, not knowing if that was a lie just yet. The score wasn't quite big enough to justify the killing so far. As soon as the cross was removed, they felt a stirring underneath their feet. Wally was scared and jumped out of the hole. Where are you going? Fritz demanded. Shh, something's moving under there, Wally stammered. I'm sure it's just rats, Fritz said, revealing his anger. Help me with this lid if you expect to get any of this score, Fritz said, and Wally jumped back down into the grave. A moment later, they both were flung up and out of the hole as the coffin lid exploded upwards. The two landed on the ground and stared as a woman floated out of the grave. She was wearing a beautiful and intricate dress from the turn of the century, with long, flowing brown hair hanging down past her shoulders. She was the most beautiful woman that the two had ever seen. What the hell? Fritz said. Hazel turned her head sharply towards him and made him her target. Such language. You are not a man of culture, are you? I'm a man of profit. I don't give a damn about culture, Fritz said. Oh, well, I can respect that. How do you feel about killing? She asked. Fritz didn't respond right away. He stared at her and thought about what he was seeing, then decided to play this real cool. Killing? If it gets me a couple bucks in my pocket, I don't mind it, Fritz said. What the heck? Wally yelled. Shut up, Fritz said, knowing that a person with this much power could be his meal ticket. Fritz, while trying to present a level of confidence, got up and approached the woman. Hazel, I presume, Fritz said, and held his hand out. She took the cue and put her hand out to his, and he kissed it. Her flesh was freezing. How can I be to your assistance, my lady? Fritz said. First, help me find and kill the people that shoved me in that wretched box. Fritz stepped back a few feet to look into the grave. There was nothing else in it. Other than the cross, she was wearing the rest of what was supposed to be his big score. The jewelry she had on, he estimated to be worth a couple grand. "Who are you looking for?" Fritz asked. "What are you doing?" Wally demanded. "Do you mind?" Fritz yelled at Wally. "Fritz, you're not that fond of your friend here, are you? Not all that attached?" Hazel asked. "How do you know my name?" She didn't respond. "No, not incredibly," he decided to tell her. "Well, just to help our communication, do you mind if I use him to satiate my hunger? That way I can concentrate on our conversation without hunger or interruption." She asked. "Sure, do what you gotta do," Fritz said, and waved goodbye to Wally, who had already jumped to his feet and was running to his car. With grace, she leapt to him in one elegant jump, with her hair and dress blowing in the breeze. When she bit Wally's throat, Fritz thought, "Okay, she is a vampire." But then she bit deeper, and Fritz could see her chewing. "And I thought we were the ghouls," Fritz said to himself. Fritz watched in horror as she consumed his flesh until there wasn't much left but a heap of bones with loose bits of meat on them. She ate his heart. She ate his liver. The only organs left behind were his intestines, bladder, and brain. And that was only because it was encased in his skull. When she was done, she was covered in gore and blood. Fritz tried to pretend like he wasn't affected by this, but his shaking knees gave him away. "So, do you still want to be my assistant?" she cackled. "Your money problems will be over. You will live a life even better than what you dreamt as a child," she offered. Yes, Fritz stuttered. "Well, first things first. I'm excited to see we have an automobile. I hadn't gotten around to obtaining one before I was shoved in that box. They were never as reliable as a horse and carriage anyhow. Less elegant, too," she explained. "Cars are faster, though. Maybe not then, but this car can get moving, even for how cruddy it looks," Fritz said, while gaining some of his confidence back. "May I drive?" she asked. She was pretending that he had a choice in the matter. If he had known how horrible being her servant was, he would have gladly chosen Wally's fate. She was a quick learner behind the wheel, and she sped down the dirt road with little worry about what the bumps could be doing to the vehicle. They hit the same stump that Wally had hit coming in. Fritz flew out of his seat and slammed into the roof. "Watch it, lady," Fritz said. She didn't slow down, and she didn't hit the brakes. If she had, they would have noticed that this time, that old stump did in fact rip out the brake line. When she hit the main road, she started going faster and even figured out how to shift through the gears. "You are booking it!" Fritz yelled to be heard over the road noise. "Ah, it's nothing. I have got horses up to nearly this speed before," she offered. "How much faster will this thing go?" "I'm not sure. I haven't taken it this fast before. Wally didn't like me driving his car, and he hated it when I drove fast, Fritz said. In response, she floored it. Hey, be careful, there's a hidden turn up ahead, Fritz warned. She had wonderful vision and a good understanding of momentum, so she estimated that a couple 100 yards was about perfect to slam on the brakes. She hoped that Fritz wouldn't end up flying out the window. She thought that she would get good use out of him. When she slammed on the brakes, he didn't fly out the window, and that was because they didn't slow down at all. With that ripped-out brake line, they had no way to stop. The car didn't slow down at all. With the turn coming up rapidly, she had two choices. She could keep moving forward and plow into the timber, or try to make the turn. She went for the turn. The car rolled over 4 times and smashed into the trees she would have hit if she had gone straight. Fritz did fly out of the car, but only after smashing his face into the hard metal dash twice during the first 3 flips of the vehicle, which made his skull crack open. Her being the supernatural creature that she was, climbed out of the wreckage unscathed. Before she left the scene, she ate the remains of Fritz, feeling upset that she didn't get to torture him as she had hoped. It would have been fun breaking your spirit, she said, as she looked at his cracked open head that she held in her hands. She put her fingers into the opening of his skull and used them to crack it the rest of the way open, like a pistachio. Then she pulled out his brain. She munched on it as she walked back towards the town that had trapped her in that grave.
Well, my spookies, as we finish up our visit to the Ides of March, an unremarkable date that proved to be remarkably interested in human behavior. Specifically the kind that begins with, "This'll be fine," and ends with, "How do I delete my entire existence?" Tonight's lessons are simple, really, delivered with the elegance of a sledgehammer. Technology is wonderful, right up until it decides it's done taking requests and starts taking initiative instead. Guilt is manageable until someone gives it a shovel and a place to hide. Love is a lovely thing unless it shows up carrying a contract, a candle, and a third seat you don't remember setting out. And greed, well, greed is timeless, much like the residents of a graveyard who'd very much prefer you stop redecorating their eternal rest. If you're looking for a moral, well, here it is. The universe is always happy to let you make your own choices. It's just not as enthusiastic about letting you keep all your fingers afterward. So sleep well, my spookies, and if you wake up to a blinking cursor in the dark, don't type. It might already be typing back. And make sure to join us every week for a brand new terror tale on Wednesday, and on Saturday, another dive into the weekly Spooky Vault for some terrifying tales you need for your long weekends. Catch you next time.